You're standing in a queue, coffee shop, maybe, or a bank. Doesn't matter. You just walked in, you looked around, you found the back of the line and you stood there. Nobody told you to. There was no sign. No one explained the system. You just knew. You did it automatically, without thinking. And if someone walked past you and jumped to the front, something in you would ignite. Fast, hot, you'd feel it before you could name it. Here's the strange part. That feeling is somewhere around 300,000 years old. And the line you're standing in? It isn't really about coffee. So here's the question. Nobody has actually stopped to ask, if you stripped away every law, every religion, every government, every written code, what's left? What was the very first thing every human being on Earth ever agreed on? Before any of that existed, what was Rule 1? Here's where it gets strange, because the answer isn't what you'd expect. It's not don't kill, it's not share food, it's not even take care of children, though all of those show up early. The first rule, the one thing anthropologists have found in every single human culture ever studied without exception, is this: you cannot sleep with your immediate family. That's it. That's Rule 1. Now, before you move on, sit with how weird that actually is. Out of everything humans could have agreed on first, don't steal, don't lie, be kind to strangers, the thing that appears in 100% of documented human societies, from isolated Pacific islands to ancient African kingdoms to the people you grew up around, is a prohibition on incest. The incest taboo is the only rule that anthropologists will confidently call universal. Here's what's fascinating though. Nobody can fully agree on why. In 1891, Finnish anthropologist Edvard Westermark published a book called The History of Human Marriage, and he put forward a theory that felt almost too simple. People don't desire their close relatives because they grew up with them. Proximity during childhood, he argued, produces automatic sexual aversion. The rule didn't create the feeling created the rule for decades. People laughed at him. Sigmund Freud, who believed the incest taboo existed specifically because people secretly wanted to violate it, called Westermark's idea naive. Then someone actually tested it. In 1971, sociologist Joseph Shepard published a study out of the Israeli kibbutz system. In kibbutzim, unrelated children from different families were raised together in communal peer groups, eating together, sleeping in the same quarters, bathed together as infants. They were closer than most siblings. Then Shepard looked at 2,769 marriage records across the kibbutz system to find out how many of those childhood peers had ended up together. 14 out of 2,769. And of those 14, not one had lived together during the first 6 years of life. Westermark, it turned out, was right. Something is happening in the brain before the age of 6, a quiet, automatic closing of a door that no culture, no law, and no amount of proximity can undo. The rule wasn't invented, it was discovered. We stumbled onto it by paying attention to what we already felt. Sponsored by your childhood brain. It already made this decision for you in 1998. You weren't consulted. Now let's get back to it. Here's the part nobody talks about. The incest taboo isn't just a prohibition, it's a machine. And the person who figured that out was Claude Lévi-Strauss, a French anthropologist who published The Elementary Structures of Kinship in 1949 after years of studying kinship systems across cultures on multiple continents. His argument was devastating in its simplicity. The incest taboo doesn't just forbid something, it compels something. The moment you say you cannot marry within your family, you're automatically saying you must go outside your family to find a partner. And the moment you do that, the moment families begin exchanging members with other families, you get alliances, trade, obligation, reciprocity. Social fabric Lévi-Strauss called the incest taboo, the point where nature transcends itself. It is, in his words, the inaugural rule, the first law by which biology becomes culture. You're not just preventing inbreeding, you're building civilization out of desire redirected. Honestly, that's kind of staggering. A prohibition that works not by stopping something, but by generating something. Every treaty, every trade route, every peace made through marriage, every social bond formed between strangers traces back structurally to this one rule. You don't just follow Rule 1, you're built from it. Here's the question that actually matters though. If this rule is biological, if the aversion is wired in before the age of 6, why does it need to be a rule at all? Why make explicit what nature already handles? Because nature doesn't always handle it cleanly. Christopher Boehm is an anthropologist at the University of Southern California who spent decades studying hunter-gatherer societies across the world. In his 1999 book Hierarchy in the Forest, he documented something that sounds almost paradoxical. The most ancient human social groups weren't organized around a strong leader enforcing rules. They were organized around everyone, enforcing rules on everyone else. Hunter-gatherer bands, Boehm found, are intensely egalitarian, but not because they lack hierarchy, because the majority actively continuously suppress any individual who tries to dominate the group. Ridicule, ostracism, gossip, exile, and in extreme cases, death. These weren't punishments handed down from above. They were the group, collectively, sitting on anyone who got too big. Boehm called it a reverse dominance hierarchy, the weak defeating the strong, together to remain equal. And this is where it clicks. The first rules weren't handed down by leaders, they were enforced from below by everyone against anyone who violated them. Rule 1 wasn't decreed, it was agreed upon, silently, collectively, over generations. Because the alternative was the kind of chaos that destroyed groups and left individuals to die alone in the dark. The first law wasn't written, it was whispered, and everyone understood it without being told. You probably think of rules as things imposed on people, governments passing laws, parents setting limits, authority flowing downward, but the oldest evidence we have says the opposite. The first rules weren't imposed from the top, they emerged from the bottom, from groups of humans who understood instinctively that certain behaviors made cooperation impossible, and that without cooperation, you died. The incest taboo didn't come first because some ancient chieftain declared it, it came first because the alternative, families collapsing inward, groups fracturing, alliances failing to form, was extinction. The rule was the survival strategy. Feeling came before law, aversion came before prohibition, the body knew before the mind put it into words. Etymology aside, the word rule comes from the Latin regula, a straight stick used to measure things. Before it meant a law, a rule was literally just a tool for making sure something was the right length. Now here's what that means for you, standing in that queue. Nobody designed the line you're in. Nobody wrote the rule that you stand behind the last person and wait your turn. It emerged, the same way Rule 1 emerged, from a shared, unspoken understanding that if everyone pushed to the front, the whole thing falls apart. And something in you knows that. Something in you has always known that. Not because you were taught it, but because the version of you that didn't know it didn't survive long enough to become your ancestor. Every social rule you follow without thinking, every queue you join, every door you hold, every instinct you have about fairness and order and what's acceptable, is a thread in a fabric that's been weaving itself for 300,000 years. You didn't agree to any of it. You inherited it. You're still standing in that queue. You still don't know why it makes you angry when someone jumps it. You don't have to. The rule already knows why. And here's the thing about Rule 1. It didn't enforce itself. Someone had to notice when it was broken, someone had to feel that heat rise in their chest, that wordless, ancient anger, and turn to the group. And the group had to agree, silently, instantly, which means before the first rule, there had to be a first moment where humans could gather, could sit together long enough to feel like a group at all. We made a video about the exact moment that became possible. It wasn't language, it wasn't tools, it was a flame. One person who didn't run from it, and 4 extra hours of darkness that suddenly had somewhere to be. That's where this story actually starts. Every week there's a question you've never thought to ask, and once you hear it, you won't be able to unhear it. Subscribe button's somewhere on the screen. It's been there the whole time.